Thanks everyone for joining. Obviously we've done some short introductions before, but not to obviously the audience. So just quickly go around, Alex, Steve, Sanjay, and Amit. If you could just quickly introduce yourselves, kind of a bit about your background, and then I'll launch into what we're going to cover today, and we can start the discussion.
Shall I start
Yeah.
Morning, everyone. Lovely to see you all. And my name's Alex Butler. I have a Oops, sorry, I have a cat that just decided that was the wrong moment to move. Until last Friday, I was the executive director for digital at Citizens Advice. I've got a long career in public sector and not-for-profits. And I came into my CIO career through a rather squiggly route, definitely not through the traditional IT route. So I came from a marketing and advertising background, actually, which might account for some of my answers today.
Nice.
Thanks.
Steve?
Good morning, I'm Steve Rist. Very nice to meet you all virtually. I'm a technology advisor to private equity companies and the companies in which they invest. So I've been a technology leader for, I think my first C-suite job was 28 years ago. So a lot of breadth of experience, a lot of interesting experience. I think my personal journey with AI started in 1984 when my PhD request to study artificial neural networks was turned down as being infeasible and impractical. So I've had a very interesting last few years with some gloating, I have to say. So it'll be interesting to see what questions come up today, but very, very keen to talk to you all today.
Brilliant. Amit, if you want to go next, followed by Sanjay.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Amit. I am a digital transformation specialist. I have a very different background than most of my other speakers. I started my journey as an engineer building power plants and building petrochemical plants, and then moved to strategy, worked for companies like Equinor, and then very recently I was leading data and AI and generative AI for energy globally for Accenture. And that's where I have been deploying AI solutions, digital transformation, leveraging technology, data, and AI. That's where kind of the things that we have scaled, and I would be love to talk about some of these experiences.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Amit. I'm Sanjay. 30 plus years in industry leadership roles. I'm a transformation executive. I have been a CIO, so I feel somewhat underqualified relative to the panel, but CIO for 5 years. But most of the rest of my time has been working with technology leadership on enabling business models. So when companies figure out what they want to be when they grow up, they call me and I put a transformation program change in place, which covers people, process, technology, and culture. And the technology part is the piece that I've probably leveraged over the years. Currently working on a large technology transformation as well, albeit within the context of a broader transformation agenda for the organization. Lovely to meet you all, and hopefully we'll add some color to the discussion as we move forward.
Brilliant. Yeah. I think we've had a lot of interest in the webinar, so hopefully we'll manage to get through the bulk of it, and then there'll be questions obviously at the end from the audience. But as I was saying to the panelists, obviously, from speaking to our clients, looking at survey reports, etc., you've got massive amounts of business leaders that are focusing on transformation over the next 3 to 5 years. Technology being a key part of that and underpinning a lot of that transformation. As we see, things like generative AI and other AI tools come to market, I think there's a lot of noise around it. Generative AI obviously being one of the things that's put the kind of in the kind of front and center minds of a lot of CEOs and businesses. And I guess today we want to explore kind of the opportunities behind some of that stuff, some of the risks, some of the reasons why maybe over the last 12, 18 months, some of this stuff hasn't been done. Some of that might pertain to cost. Some of it might be other barriers within companies. And then we'll go on to talk a bit about kind of how important people are in that transformation journey, and a bit more around what we need to see in future leaders within technology and the future skill sets that be required as a modern CIO. Alex, would you like to kick off with a bit about kind of what you're seeing in your business, what you're seeing in the market, some of the challenges and opportunities presenting themselves at the moment?
I can give it a go.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think citizens advice has been any different from most organizations in terms of the way we're facing up to it. Actually, I would say overwhelmingly, there's been a lot of positive engagement around how we can do this, and some really interesting grassroots innovation in terms of trying things out. We did get stuck a little bit, I guess, in terms of wanting to get everything right first, making sure you had all the guardrails. I mean, obviously, in the work that we do, we work with people in very vulnerable situations. We need to be really, really careful with the way we start to build out our LLMs. But we have been very successful in actually doing that in a very discreet way. So we actually delivered a fantastic little pilot working alongside the Num10 AI accelerator to just think about how we could use it in a very simple way with our advisors. And that's proved really useful in building trust, getting my peers on the executive team feeling confident that it's A, something that we can do, B, it's not going to actually cost us a fortune either. And you can have quite a lot of success without putting out too much money or effort. And that's, I think, the way that we've chosen to approach it. We recognize, I think, particularly because of our national reach, that we've got quite a lot of work to do in what I call our data foundations. But that's really about being clever about using what we've got rather than spending a lot of money, as I say.
And there's a lot of conversation in there at the moment around kind of good data and how important it's had to have that sort of data integrity and things. And I think that's kind of front and center as well of most businesses' minds. So I suppose, how have you gone about assuring that you've got the right data in the right way, in the best data possible?
I think collaboration, really,
Yeah.
Staying close to your mission. So we're very mission driven, obviously, and we want to make sure that we're in a great position to be able to shine a light on what is happening deep in communities and society at a granular level. But we realized quite early on, we just although we have a lot of information, a lot of data, it's not necessarily in the right sort of place for us to be able to use it intelligently. So we have been working on that closely. And what's been interesting is a sort of growing, if you like, group of organizations like ourselves who are starting to say, well, actually, we'd be much better if we start building these foundations together. So there is a small group of charities now working in that sector to be a more intelligent kind of interface, if you like, with the government, so we can start to use that insight and use AI really intelligently in a way that delivers back into government sort of real insight into what's happening on the ground.
Mm-hmm. Did anyone want to build on that at all? I mean, Sanjay, did you want to build on what you're seeing in the market? I mean, obviously, I know that you previously were the ex-CIO of Tate and Lyle. Now you're in a transformation role. What are your experiences with, you delivered lots of technology change in your time. So what are your sort of experiences with what's happening at the moment and kind of emerging technologies?
Look, look, having been in technology for a long time, I used to work for IBM and worked for other companies. There are these trends, right? I mean, you made the point about generative. Generative is the current vogue topic. It's not a new technology, as all of us knows, right? However, it has caught the attention of many people because of the potential of what it could do. And you talked about the last 15, 18 months. When it started, it was a new toy and everyone wanted to play with a new toy. Everyone was told, go set up your, ChatGPT generative AI. We had to do some education and learn what was a large language model. It's no different to what, Steve, you probably wrote in your PhD many moons ago, right? However, there was an education process and there was lots of excitement. So my observation is, the usual curve, right? optimism, early starters. Some people invest, other people too busy, they leave someone else to figure it out. However, it has matured. So there is a lot more happening at scale now, which was one of the earlier challenges. I could do a small pilot, but how do I scale? If I pick on Alex's point, what my observation has been, both in my own experience in the CIO role, but also elsewhere, is people are now getting very specific. What business problem am I trying to solve, right? If we talk about data, to pick up on Alex's point, right, early on, well, of course we can scan the whole of the internet because the internet's been around for a long time, and I can do generative AI on the internet, and everyone has free access to it. Well, what's the quality of the information that's on the internet? So what insights are you getting from that you can actually make business decisions out of? Wall number one. Okay, actually, well, why don't I use my own internal information? Then we hit Alex's second wall, which is, yeah, but what's the quality of the data in my own internal systems? Problem back to IT. Well, actually, IT doesn't own the data. The data is owned by the business functions. How much information have you got in there, and how much are you paying attention? So we're getting through those sorts of issues, but whether we focus on our purpose or whether we focus on the business problem, wouldn't it be nice if I could take that external data and my internal data and bring those two together to drive greater insights for making business decisions, whether those are financial decisions, market decisions, or otherwise. So people getting much more laser focused. Some industries are further ahead. One, because they've got big pockets like banks and insurance companies, and two, because they've got very specific problem cases. Insurance company can scan and say what claims are being made, what's the relevance of this particular person who's applying for insurance, and can actually mine that information relatively easily compared to others where that information isn't available. So I guess a long way of saying there's a maturity curve that's happening, and I'm not just picking on generative AI, but technology in general. My biggest observation is we are currently at a point where technology can do more things than organizations and people have the bandwidth to absorb.
And that's this
that wasn't the case a long time ago. A long time ago, people were like, if only I could do this with technology, but technology is not there yet. We're the other way around now. Technology can do lots of stuff. We just haven't got the bandwidth to play with them all, learn them all, get them through the generations. That's a massive issue at the moment.
Yeah, and this is the sort of analysis paralysis thing I mentioned earlier before we joined the webinar. Is there's so many options out there, is it almost kind of stalling businesses? But then I suppose if you stall too much, does that present risk to your business performance? Potentially, is that people outcompete you. But I mean, Steve, obviously you interject now.
You're on mute, Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's exactly like, which gym do I join in January? I can't decide which gym I'm going to join, so I won't join the gym and I'll still be fat in February in my case, okay? Get started, okay? So, Sanjay is absolutely right. I've done lots of ERP transformation programs and project turnarounds and recoveries, and projects, large projects are big, expensive. You absolutely need expert help. And they're failing today for the reasons they failed in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. And it's about us and them. It's about a lack of focusing on problems, a lack of focusing on value creation, a lack of focusing on what we can do for our customers. And it's, we will talk about, the business's data, IT's contain, all that kind of stuff. It's our problem. It's our opportunity. If we don't solve it, somebody else is going to solve it. And that will have dire consequences for your business, your shareholders, your stakeholders, and so on. And we've seen in banking that the service you may get from a challenger bank like Starling, where you can sign up for a business bank account in about 3 minutes, versus Barclays. I've banked with Barclays for 30 years. It took them 3 months to lose my paperwork. Now you'd say, Barclays tier 1 bank, Starling is a challenger, but that's a kind of an old-fashioned digital challenger startup. What does an AI-enabled bank startup look like? What would that do to your business if you're a bank? So what I always say is, there's a joke which some people will have heard before, which is, in the days when the older ones amongst us would build a big data, we need an enterprise data warehouse. We need all the data. Thank you for smiling, Sanjay. We need all the data in the same place, in the same format. And when the first time I built a data warehouse, the joke was it'll be £5 million, 5 years, and 5 CIOs. Because those projects create no value at all. The board gets fed up and people get fired, and then somebody else comes in and gets fired and gets fired and gets fired. Every business has got islands of good data. Okay, so for the paralysis thing, it's not to paraphrase JFK, it's not what can you do, where is all of your data? It's what can you do with the data that you've got? So find an island of good data. Think entrepreneurially. What can I do today with that data that would help me with a business problem or help delight my customers? Okay, what could I do next week? What can I do the week after? So think like an entrepreneur. How little can I spend? How quickly can I move? Because that will build the coalition of the willing. That will build the business case for end-to-end AI enablement. So in private equity, some of my clients, we're looking at the AI enterprise where AIs are talking to other AIs. So when there will be fully federated AI businesses where agents are just talking to each other, and many business processes will have no people mediating them at all because there isn't enough margin to have them in there. So I'm not saying that the world is over, it's terrible, stop. I'm saying exactly the contrary. Do what you can today. There is something you can do today. I was with Salesforce on Monday, so anybody who's got Salesforce could build an intelligent agent to help you with telephony overstretch and improve customer satisfaction. And it took 5 minutes to build intelligent agents that will actually answer all your FAQs and that kind of thing. 5 minutes. You've all got 5 minutes. You all have lunch. You all have food. You can go and build an agent. Or somebody young and bright and untrammeled by the last 30 years of ways of doing things can build one for you if you give them the right incentive. But if you take one thing away from today, get started.
And I think there's obviously touching on some of the things you mentioned there. There's obviously natural barriers and things we can talk about after this, but risk to people's jobs and how you deliver that in companies. But Amit, do you have anything to add? Obviously, I know you've spent a number of years with Accenture, obviously consulting to numerous businesses on these very things, these emerging technologies. In your experience, what have you been seeing? What's worked well? What have been the challenges that you've seen in organizations?
Sure. So I think so both Sanjay and Steve brought out some very relevant point, and I can exemplify some of these because in the last 2 years when I was leading GenAI for energy at Accenture, we did a lot of research, right? So and one of my main job was to kind of educate both internally as well as work with clients and kind of give them an impression of how generative AI can change their life. Now, there are two things that I would mention that has been fairly relevant in my last 10 years of implementing AI. I have never seen in my 20 years of career a non-tech company's board member are talking about a technology, an implementation of the technology before. I mean, it has only started happening with generative AI. It was a huge agenda in Davos where government, companies, tech companies, non-tech companies were talking about how generative AI can essentially talk about productivity, etc., etc. Yes, part of it would be a bit of more exemplified, exploded, etc. It would come down, yes. But the thing is, to me, it is more like a Trojan horse, right? So once you are in, you will do a lot of things. So Alex was talking about a lot of looking at data foundation. And it's not only data foundation, but many of the technologies, etc. And for the last 5 or 6 years, at least, I have been using the term as technical debt. And that is something what even Sanjay was also talking about. A lot of the companies, because technology used to be far behind, CIOs, CDOs, I have engaged with a lot of CDOs as well. They were kind of working with the businesses and they started kind of thinking, looking it forward. Now, what essentially has made some of the companies, I would say majority of the companies have a lot of technical debt. They're very limited invested in data foundations, technologies, platforms, etc., or they had never invested in companies like, I mean, some of the utilities companies, their data center is erstwhile toilets because that's where they could fit in the data center. Now, you need to transform these companies, so you definitely need some money, etc. Which I would assume it's not a future investment; it is just paying your debts, and that's why I typically call them as a debt. Second element is yes, you need to start, but you need to make a plan for start because the challenge that I've also seen in AI implementation and digital implementation, people start randomly, right? And 8 of the 10 projects are in best scenario, they are hobby projects because somebody wanted, they started doing it. And then eventually might not have any value impact or any significant impact in creating foundation, if not a negative impact on the foundations. So in my sense, the company needs to kind of make a bit of a plan, get somebody to kind of make a comprehensive analysis in terms of what I need to invest in the foundation, what I need to do, low hanging fruits, both on the corporate functions or the main areas of my operations. What would be something that I can use Salesforce like, right? I mean, the good thing is a lot of these SaaS platform, whether it is SAP, Salesforce, Workday, they are investing heavily into AI and Gen AI based solution. And if I'm as a company, if I'm a, let's say, energy utility company, or I'm a manufacturing company which has a sales, do I need to invest something on the marketing and the sales side? No, I should, let's say, use something like Salesforce or many of those products. And that kind of a comprehensive thinking, that where I need to put my bets on, because if it is a core function like making a product myself, that is proprietary. There I would need to invest into building my own AI and generative AI. And believe me, it's not cheap. So whatever resources I can find, I will focus, and rest I'll buy, but ultimately make a plan which essentially ties up into the foundation so that it doesn't mess up things 5 years down the line.
You mentioned it's not cheap, but are there potentially more cost-effective routes for business leaders exploring these new
So
technologies?
exploring is cheap. Exploring is cheap. Mind you, the scaling is more expensive. So and when I say not being expensive, I mean it's expensive in range of things, right? So a single Google search, I mean the challenge is like when you do as a consumer, it is heavily discounted. The chat GPT is burning billions of dollars raising money. It is not necessarily paying in money to its employees. It is the compute power that's going in. To give you some numbers that I learned is like the amount of consumption of energy, etc., that goes in one Google search is 1/10 of what goes in Copilot or essentially in ChatGPT. So you're talking about energy, compute consumption, carbon footprint, and of course, if you're doing it as an enterprise, you have to pay for it, and that's expensive stuff, right? So I often have built for my clients a very comprehensive value-based model, which essentially takes care of many of these components on both on the side of giving value out of it or essentially what is costing. And CIO love those things because the fact is a lot of these things are forgotten when people are talking about it. Look, ChatGPT is free, Copilot is free. No, it is not.
Yeah.
It is going to cost you.
Yeah.
Sorry, Matt, I was just wondering, so I couldn't agree more with Amit, but I think that this is the kind of quintessential thing. So an enterprise grade deployment for a given level of service to a given number of customers at a certain level of availability needs that level of planning. You can spend 6 months planning and the prices keep changing from Amazon and different language models come in and go, and you've spent 6 months looking at a spreadsheet and created nothing. I think you have a twin track approach that says we can do this for a pilot group. The pilot group loves it. Customer satisfaction is great. People are happy to use that. We've now got the basis for a business plan that says if we scale this to 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, we can ramp up and we'll know it's going to work. And if it starts failing, we can bail out quickly and cheaply. And I think that's the thing that the power of the technology lets us do now is build things quickly and cheaply, desk side or otherwise. And I agree, knowing which ones to work on is quite interesting. Although I have clients who are doing an XPRIZE model and encouraging side of the desk, experimentation because they're trying to build an entrepreneurial culture around AI. And that's something that technologists tend not to talk about. It's 10% AI, 45% data, 45% people. So all the chief people officers, HR directors on this call, you have got a bigger role to play in this actually than the CIO has by encouraging the board to build that culture. So just do the twin track, learn, be curious, be bright-eyed, be ambitious, but knowing, as all the grown-ups around the table know, that when you want to make this reliable, scalable, regulated, legal, there is some investment to make, but you don't have to make the investment up front necessarily.
There are some challenges though, right? So I don't disagree. And it's why we started early, learned quickly, stopped them quickly. But I think there is some eyes open elements here, right? We've clearly talked about the data. We've talked about the data security and what decisions are going to people make that will impact your business. The thing I would overlay, which I said earlier on, is focus on business outcomes. And I agree with your point, Steve, on customers, right? So I absolutely agree, because that's where the money comes from. At the end of the day, the salary doesn't come from the company per se. It comes from wherever the money's coming from. Clearly in a commercial organization, that's usually from customers. I think a lot of that is lost in the technology conversation because we focus on the technology conversation, whether that's at board level or elsewhere. What are the hurdles we need to overcome with the technology? How much is it going to cost me to run? To the point that was made by Amit, right? Because there is a little pyramid underneath the iceberg, which is the initial cost is relatively low, but consumption of data costs you like a utility, right? Buying a video is one thing, paying for Netflix every single month is a different thing. And that's fundamentally the charging model here. You're paying by volumetrics. The more you open it up to everyone in the organization to be entrepreneurial, the more that spend is going to multiply by the number of times that you're using the data. So eyes open would be my counsel. Focus on solving business problems. If there's a genuine business problem, it will pay for itself. And the more business problems we solve, the more volume we get in this space, the lower the price will come. Early adopters always pay a premium because our cloud providers want to fund all of those data centers in the cloud, because they are physical, by the way. And therefore, the early adopters will pay a premium. Early adopters are those where the business case is obvious. It makes sense to have those things automated, but we're in that process where people are learning and we're going up that learning curve. I do agree with your point, Steve. Opening it up to more people has to be the right answer. It's not typically what technology leaders want to do. Yeah? So there's a conundrum there between having more wide access to technologies like generative AI, whilst having to control the cybersecurity issues, the cost of the data, the infrastructure associated with it, the policies that need to be in place in terms of careful use. There is a balancing point. Many companies are working that out. We had to figure it out ourselves, write some new policies, but that's the job, right? The generation of it's all controlled. You buy the tool, you build the tool, you deploy the tool, gone. There's a new paradigm in town.
And hasn't it always been like this, though? Technology transformations really aren't about technology, are they, at the end of the day? And what we get wrong is that we go off in pursuit of the new, and we don't deal with the legacy. And by the legacy, I don't just mean the technology, I mean the mindsets, the cultures, the ways of working. And that's the key to it, really. You've got to do those things in parallel. So I completely agree with you about that.
And then, I mean, we've talked about some of the sort of, I suppose, barriers, haven't we? I think some of the stuff you're saying, Sanjay, there sounds like in many instances you need to be able to influence potentially like the CEO, the CFO in understanding what is possible to achieve through technology changes, right? Because if they don't understand that, then it's hard to sometimes get the sign off for the money ultimately, right?
Yeah, look, I come back to, again, depends what conversation we want to have, right? If we want to talk about technology leadership, which is one of the strands that we had, right? My opinion is it's more about business leadership going forward than it is about technology leadership. Many of us have talked about the fact that we didn't come from a traditional technology background. I'm an engineer by background, I'm a chemical engineer. So how do I get into technology leadership is by actually understanding what the business problems, customer problems are, and how technology could support that. So Alex, you're right there. But the paradigm is different. Packaged technology has moved on. SaaS is there, but also more accessible technology is there. So one of the conversations we have is, why is it at home I can do a whole bunch of stuff? I can talk to Alexa and get stuff done. Come to the office, I'm having to type things. Why isn't that made it into the commercial world? So that's my point about disconnect. There's things that technology can do. The pace in which we can absorb it, typically in larger organizations, is lagging on. So the remit, whether it's for technology leadership or business leadership, is how do we focus our attention on those things that make a difference to our business? Where is it that we can leverage that? And the choice is wide. Tangible examples are in individual industries. Individual industries, from my observation, because I've worked across industry, have figured out that in our particular case, I actually don't need human beings to do certain things. I can get technology to do that. I can design a car in real time and make that available to customers, and they can pick and choose their colors and their palette and the leather seats, etc., etc. I can ship that automatically to the factories that can then be optimized because they don't need to make 20,000 cars that sit in a car lot anymore. They can customize them individually. So there are very clear examples. I used insurance the previous time about actually you don't need to fill in physical forms anymore for insurance policies. It's all done online, and the machine in the background is already validating that you qualify or you don't qualify, is already doing a search for which companies are the best suited for you and coming back to you. So that there are lots of real tangible examples. If I sell something on eBay or a sales platform, it will rewrite it using generative AI and something that's much more eloquent than the words that I could use. So there are real examples where it makes sense.
Yeah.
And those of us that come from commercial companies, a large legacy, one I'm working for is 100 years old, the one I was working for before is 170 years old. There's a laggard element there where you've got to play catch up. But there's other things that we're trying to do. Doing the next chat GPT is not on the priority list because there's those fundamental things to do in running the business.
Yeah, I think, let me just chip in. I agree. I think back to your point about costs, again, I totally agree with you, but I think you can cash box these things on cloud platforms, so you're not going to get a £50,000 bill when you've given somebody £500 to spend. So there are very sensible short-term tools, which I agree that you need to use. So a couple of practical examples. So I know of an online university that built a tutor chatbot that digested, so it had a standard large language model in many languages, so not just the language of this organization, and they built and trained, the fact that lecturers trained in AI into their course materials, their view on the kind of study books and things. They rolled that bot out to universities, and it got amazing customer satisfaction from students. Because rather than sending an email to a lecturer saying what is the significance of this particular piece of legislation and not getting a reply, they're actually getting an accurate reply that the lecturer had kind of pre-approved. In real time via voice channels and other things. They could do it on the train on headphones and that kind of stuff. So, things about insurance, cars. I used to work in the car industry. We've had that configure, price, quote, build technology without AI, and there's lots of stuff that's written. There's lots of stuff being sold as AI that absolutely is not AI. So it's happening. I was advising some private equity firms. There was a law firm. Yeah, it's a business applied, a bit like BIE, but it's applied lawyers rather than extremely good IT and data professionals. And I was being an expert to the technical due diligence on that, having been a CTO for a law firm. And my expert calls were on the day that ChatGPT passed the American bar exam. And my question to the investors was, what's this company's story on ChatGPT becoming a paralegal and starting to, a lot of stuff that lawyers do is extremely routine, cookie cutter stuff that you don't need a lawyer to do, but you need a lawyer to carry the liability of it having been done properly. And they went, it won't have any disruption in our business model at all. Do you think so? Well, yeah, none of us believe that. And they could not get that transaction away because the future risk of disruption. So the culture point that Sanjay laid out very clearly, 100-year-old companies, 170-year-old companies, it's not about the technology. It's about the appetite to change, and a change-resistant culture is going to find life very, very difficult. So I heard a great stat the other day. So this is time to get to 100 million users. The mobile phone took 16 years to get to 100 million users. Facebook took 2.7 years to get to 100 million users. ChatGPT, OpenAI took 2 months. So if you think as a board, as a leadership, as a leader, as a thought leader, people leader, culture leader, that you have got 5 years, and you'll get around to it because we've got a current backlog, and we've got to eat the current backlog now before we can think about ChatGPT. Great, and I really, really hope you survive. But we're all familiar with the story of Kodak that had invented the digital camera, had the patents on digital cameras, and sold those patents to other people to subsidize losses in its film industry, because Kodak was the first film company, it's the oldest film company in the world. George George Eastman, they couldn't see that the winds of change were blowing very, very hard, and they were not able to adapt quickly enough. So there are whole sectors whose business models are no longer tenable in an AI world, because a lot of it is just supplying people to do low-grade things. So there's a lot of business process outsourcing businesses. I think Accenture's got centers. All the large consulting firms have got centers, largely for putting data from system A into data to system B and handing it to somebody else. Those are going to get AI'd very, very, very quickly. So if your business is geared around human capital management, if your business is geared around business process automation, in the short term, you're going to do really, really, really well, because you're going to have, maybe you'll take 20% of people out. Maybe in 5 years' time, you'll have 20% of the people you have now. But year 6, year 7, year 8, it's going to be in Salesforce. It's going to be in SAP. It's going to be in Dynamics, and you won't need the BPO at all. So I think as a board, you've got to start thinking about the future of your organization. As an exec, you've got to think about, is our transformation portfolio optimized? Are we thinking about doing the right things quickly? Are we thinking about time to value? Are we getting new and controversial thinking in there, or is there a 170-year-old group think going on? Sanjay, Alex, Amit, we're all as people who get our mortgages paid by being in technology. It's not about the technology, it's about you.
Was there anything, Amit, you wanted to add to that? Just conscious that I don't know if you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm here.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah.
No, man, I think so. That's a fair point, and one thing that at least I have learned in my transformation experience, and a lot of people have allured towards that fact, is like, yes, there are challenges in debt or whatever it is, and like you need to start. But the thing is that, for example, where I have worked extensively with my CDOs are in two areas. One is helping the business to kind of have a value-based criteria, because if you're not going to prioritize where to start with, you're going to randomly start with people interest, which could be hobby, which might not lead to very great ROI. Second element is, which is something also being talked about by others, including Alex and Sanjay, is like about people, right? So you are talking about at a large scale, there are two elements: upskilling. So you would have to work on certain profiles of people who need to upskill. Second is building awareness. And this is something that I have faced firsthand in large manufacturing or large energy companies. You're talking about AI-based decision-making process, right? Fundamentally changing the way typically blue-collar operators or operations people have been working. If you don't make them aware of, let's say, this is how AI is going to work, these are the limitations, these are the challenges, and these are the plus points, you are getting into a pitfall that they will learn on their own from Facebook and WhatsApp, right? You can't stop that. So you would have to make sure that they are fully aware of both positives and the negatives to onboard them in the transformation. And unlike any other business transformation, the challenge here with AI is that a lot of it is kind of a black box. So you can't see, right? So for example, you can't see how AI was trained as a model, right? A lot of people, even data scientists themselves, are not that well equipped to kind of look under the hood, or sometimes the hood, for example, in Salesforce is locked, so you can't look inside, right? So you need to train people. So to me, what I used to work extensively setting up digital academies and all. So you are talking about building capabilities, because some of this capability never existed in the company. So I'm talking about non-tech companies. So they never had AI engineers and so on and so forth as a core capability. Second is enhancing awareness. In fact, sometimes in between. So for example, maintenance schedulers, they now need to have a very thorough understanding of how to use AI and essentially leverage AI in scheduling activities, right? So they are quasi, so they have gone through almost like 6 months kind of a intense training, etc. So to me, these are very strong capabilities that companies needs to invest on. they need to work with their with HR or with the CDOs, etc., etc. But most importantly is the COO who is responsible, so that it is a top down, right? Because then most likely you will face a lot of resistance. There are various ways and mechanisms that it can be made as a reward based. I mean, I did it in a couple of companies where we used to reward people, because in blue collar operators, you are also talking about unionized employees, right? So it is not easy to add a training. So what we used to do was we used to reward people with, let's say, merchandise, etc., once they complete. So there were a lot of gamification we did. But to me, it is the right format that the companies need to think through, because otherwise they would make a fancy tool which is working great but nobody's using. And those components of transformation, the basic components that needs to be addressed as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alex, go on.
So I was gonna, that was really interesting, Amit. I was just thinking about that from the perspective of working in an organization which is very federal. So I can't mandate people to do things. So I've tried the opposite version of that, which is really to just democratize it. So rather than try and maintain control over everything, what we've done is, for example, give really basic BI tools to all of our federated offices, and give them the confidence and a little bit of data analytics training. We've now got, a really powerful machine. This is like, hundreds of times bigger than I would ever be given the investment to go out and buy a load of data scientists in. So we've got that just by giving people some really basic and cheap tools, actually, that probably part of our licensing anyway. And as I say, giving them the confidence and some really basic guardrails for using the AI tools within those digital tool sets. And I found that actually just really going back to basics in terms of and I was sort of remembering this. I'm old enough to remember when social media was first on the scene, and I was working in central government at the time, and everybody was running around going, oh my goodness me, there's going to be lots of civil servants talking about things that they shouldn't do on Facebook. Just keeping calm and saying to people, you know what? When you're on Facebook, just remember to be a civil servant. You know what it is to be a civil servant. You signed up to those things. It's exactly the same when you're in these spaces. And I guess we're just seeing the same thing here, aren't we? People need to just keep calm. Remember, they know what they should and they shouldn't be talking about out in public. They know what data, they know about keeping personal data secure, and creating trust around the way you do that. And it's exactly the same culture. So just in some ways, you don't have to rewrite it. You just have to keep doing what you do really well, and just think of this just as the next wave,
So maybe if I can pick up on that, Matt, right? Because I agree with that. Again, back to the theme about it's a wave, right? It's a journey. I think one of the things that I want to touch on that was mentioned by some of the other speakers is the role of, and I'll use air quotes, technology leadership. So if I take the word technology out of it, the role of leadership. If I take AI out of the sentences, it's just another technology. And I think part of future leaders' roles is to broaden from having a depth of understanding of technology to having a depth of understanding of how to make change happen. To your point, Alex, it is about making change happen. And change happens at the human being level. Whether you take the role away from them because you technology enable it, or whether you give them capabilities to leverage technology, there is a change journey. And I think for me, leaders more and more have to understand, one, the nature of the business that they're in. Your business, Alex, is very different to some of the commercial businesses. Commercial businesses are very different by industry sector. Countries are very different in terms of the cultures of people and that they've got engaged in them. So that, I think, is a remit I would pass on to people about how do you stay current by learning what works and what doesn't work, understanding the culture of the different organizations that you're part of, and understanding how you drive that change journey. So echo the point earlier on, it is about technology and it isn't about technology. So there are elements that some of us need to have adequate understanding of the technology, because those roles are still going to be needed. But more and more at the leadership level, it is about the non-technology parts of making some of those changes happen. And that is
sorry, Sanjay. I thought you finished. Sorry.
Go ahead, Steve. It's not taught in many cases, but I would encourage the audience to spend your time on understanding and learning those pieces.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, we had a question, in the chat of, why can't IT get sponsorship to transform things? And it's because you're talking about IT, probably. You're talking about technical debt. And, the question is, what value are you creating by doing something? And what risk are you eliminating by doing something in the case of technical debt? If the business decides, or the board decides, the board is sovereign, that in its collective wisdom, it's not worth doing, it's not worth doing. And it may be not because the business doesn't understand, everything. It's because, as Sanjay is absolutely right, you as a technology leader do not understand the customer, what the customer needs, what the business needs, what the stakeholders need for non-commercial businesses. And you have not made the case properly. It's not the business's fault. And I do an awful lot of CTO, CIO, CDO mentoring these days. And it's a very, very common refrain of, why can't I convince them to do what I know is right? You're just not doing your job properly. And it's a very, very difficult story. It's easier for people who've come from a non-technical background, because they've drifted into it because they wanted to see probably technology done properly. And they had the frustrations, they became part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And so again, for the chief people officer people around the table, I think look for the characters in your organization that can have the imagination, drive, ambition to embrace this, support them with training and particularly with certifications. They are consciously competent, recognize them and reward them, supplement them with experts while you need it, because we all need, we're all taught how to drive, we're all helped to learn to walk. You don't just wake, you're not born and walk, you don't step into a car and drive straight away. But it's a lot of this is going to be around those characters that can understand value and value creation and customer centricity and colleague centricity, much less than it's going to be around knowing how to configure a Cisco router, because increasingly a lot of that stuff, whilst absolutely vital, and the essential plumbing is increasingly going to be configured by algorithms and by AIs themselves, who are going to talk to you and say, what am I doing? What's my purpose as a Cisco router? And I have seen those demos, and I will set you up properly. It's an evolution of a sort of setup wizard, but it's becoming easier. That barrier to entry is going, and the kind of the high priesthood of the network and the high priests of the mainframe that I kind of grew up with, they're increasingly less relevant, and they're increasingly a problem to be managed rather than something that's going to create value for your enterprise.
Yeah. I think I haven't had to interject at all there, really. I think as we've gone along, we've ended up summarizing various points through kind of, barriers to transformation, sponsorship, what you need to see from future leaders, future tech leaders, whether it's tech or obviously Sanjay's point, just leaders in general. I think we have some questions that have come in that have been kind of naturally answered as we've been going through the webinar, but I guess I just wanted to open up for any additional questions that might be coming in through the Q&A section of the webinar. If there's anything we haven't summarized for you well enough, or any additional information you might want to ask anyone particular, obviously we will provide some commentary afterwards and stuff like that. And if there's any questions that haven't been answered properly, we can come back with additional information following this. But I guess a couple of questions that have come through, they've been cut again in the Q&A section, which I'm not sure if you have access to this. I think it was after one of your points, Alex, but in one of Tony Evans had asked, how do you evaluate kind of quality of data of such a large quantity. He basically said, how do you evaluate the quality of such a large quantity of data on which the AI model is based? So I guess he's asking, if you have huge amounts of data, how do you know if what you've got is good? But I guess that also, your point, Steve, covered that a little bit earlier.
I would say, hallucination, if people aren't familiar with the term, is when an AI is confidently wrong. So it's a bit like having a 15-year-old who's just come back from the pub, in my experience. Test, 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 test. Because an AI says it, don't mean it's true. Okay. You'll have AI saying, well, we'll generate our own test data and execute the test script so we can prove to you that we're right. And that way madness lies, I think. So you're going to move from engineering to a lot more testing, a lot more risk management.
Can I just add to that, Steve? Because there's a bit more to that, in my opinion, right? One is the quality of what you put into it in the first place. So that is something you have control over if you exercise control. What data did you feed the model? My earlier point about if you feed it the internet data and you've got confidence in everything that's on the internet, good luck to you. If you feed it your own data, you better make sure that your own data is robust enough. So that's one element. And the second one is the point that Amit made, which is the models are so complicated, no one really understands the algorithms in the model. By the way, they were created by human beings, but then you argue they become self-learning, so they fill in the gaps and hallucinate in the model. Testing, I agree with you. I would finesse it a little bit better, which is if you understand the business and therefore the outcome of the model, then you can validate that outcome makes sense. I'll give you a very simple example. How many people drive with Google Maps, and how many times have you driven down a road, not paid attention, except to the map, and then turned up to the wrong place? Pay attention to the environment that you're in and say, hang on a second, I'm not headed the right way. No different to when you get an output from a business model. It's telling you to cut the price of that thing by 53% and you'll make more revenue. Well, that doesn't actually make sense. I don't care what the model is telling me. So pay attention to what the thing is telling you. You can test it all you like, but as you say, the machine will say it's 100% accurate. So one, figure out the data that you're feeding into it and make sure that's reliable. And two, pay attention to what it's telling you rather than blindly allowing people to make decisions based on it.
Yeah, I'll just come back. I agree with you. I think my point was about the foundational models that somebody else has trained. You're quite right. If it's your data, it's like you are accountable to your colleagues and to your customers. Absolutely. You can't control the foundational models, and the foundational models are now starting to be contaminated by consuming data that Gen AI has created.
Yeah.
So they're having to label data that Gen AI has created, so they exclude it from their foundation models, which is Sanjay's point on steroids, frankly. So keep the garbage out of your model, but the only way of validating is, you say, have some common sense, don't trust it implicitly, and just make sure the outcomes you're expecting are the outcomes you're expecting. In fact, a woman, there was a court case yesterday, or in the news yesterday, a woman had died by following Google Maps the wrong way up a trunk road and was killed.
It happens.
One of the other questions that came in, I think, was specifically to you, Steve, is from Ben Atkins, who was interested, given the PE space is often about value creation. What do you see as the key common opportunities in this space which drive business value? You're on mute.
Ben, if you want to connect offline, I'm happy to give you a fuller answer. We don't have long left.
Yeah.
The simple answer is it depends. Okay, depends on the nature of business. There is an awful lot of work being done on good CRM platforms, Salesforce Dynamics, to make salespeople more efficient. So pretty much, other than Alex, I think everybody's businesses sell things to people, but you still need to market to people. So there's an awful lot of co-piloting, assistance, lead scoring that's applicable to every business. There's an awful lot of work being done in customer service, in terms of customer self-service, service through the voice channel, the Alexa point that Sanjay made. With people on Zoom calls and that kind of thing, chatbots are more popular than ever because you can do the stuff that you need to do while appearing to be at work, whilst in fact transacting with chatbots in the background. So it does depend. There are niche use cases, and there are whole AI-enabled businesses that didn't exist before, but those are the common use cases. And again, if you've got companies on bespoke software, I think Sanjay made this point earlier on, they are very unlikely to be able to make meaningful investments on those platforms to keep up with. In fact, Gartner reports that 50% of people, and these are large enterprises that invested in their own foundational large language models, are cancelling those investments because we're talking about S&P 50 companies who can no longer afford to be in that race. Okay, so if your technology stack is home built, old, niche, and your CTO is employee number one to be with you for 20 years, as an exec, have a good hard think about how you get onto a sort of standard commercial off the shelf stack, because that's the only way you'll really be able to be in the game.
Mm. No, understood. I mean, we do have a couple of other questions coming in, but again, conscious we are literally almost nearing the end of this. So I think if there are questions specific to individual people and they keep coming through, then I think we will obviously take this offline and go to Alex, Sanjay, Amit, or Steve, and come back to you with any commentary on those questions. I guess from my side, I just want to say thank you, obviously, to all of you on the panel today. I think it's been a really interesting conversation. I didn't really have to do much in the second half, so thanks for making my job easy. I think we've summarized most of the points we wanted to get through. And obviously, we'll let you all go now, and we'll interact with you each individually after this. And thanks again from me, and thanks from BIE.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thanks so much.